The Jajamata Express ran on the Pune-Bombay route. The racing mind of Professor Gangat Harpant Gaitonde had a plan.
In Bombay, I will go to a library and read history books. Because that is the surest way of finding out how the present conditions reached. I will return to Pune and talk with Rajendra Deshpande, who will help me understand what had happened.
The train stopped beyond a long tunnel. It was a small station, called Surhud. An Anglo-Indian in uniform went through the train, checking tickets.
Ticket, please.
This is where the British Raj begins. You are going for the first time, I presume?
Yes. And Khan Sahib, how will you go to Peshawar?
This train goes to Bombay. I will take the frontier mail tonight.
How far does it go? By what route?
From Bombay, it goes to Delhi. From there.
After that, Khan Sahib spoke a lot about his business, and Gangat Harpant was a willing listener. For, in that way, he was able to get some flavor of life in this India that was so different. The train now passed through the suburban rail traffic. The blue carriages carried the letters GBMR.
GBMR. Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway. See the tiny Union Jack painted on each carriage? A gentle reminder that we are in British territory.
The train stopped at its destination, Victoria Terminus. The station looked neat and clean. The staff was mostly made up of Anglo-Indians and Parsas, along with some British officers. As he emerged from the station, Gangat Harpant faced a building.
East India House headquarters of the East India Company. What? The East India Company was closed after 1857. At least that's what history books say. Yet, here it is, not only alive, but progressing. So, history had taken a different turn, before 1857. How and when did it happen? I have to find out.
As he walked along Hornby Road, he found a different set of shops and office buildings. There was no handloom house building. Instead, there were Boots and Woolworth departmental stores, offices of British banks, as in a street in England. He entered Forbes' building.
I wish to meet my son, Mr. Vinay Gaitonde, please.
She searched through the telephone list, the staff list, and then through the directory of employees of all the branches of the firm.
I'm afraid I can't find anyone of that name, either here, or in any of our branches. Are you sure he works here?
Thank you.
Everything was strange. The Union Jack on train carriages, the East India Company still working, and the streets looking as if they were in England. India was looking different from what history books said. According to his plan, he went to the library. After a quick lunch, he asked for a list of history books, including his own. Yes. He had also written some history books.
Up to the 4th volume, the history is the same as I know it. That means, the change had occurred in the 5th, the last volume. Yes. Here. The Battle of Panipat, between the Marathas and the Mughals. The Marathas won. Abdali was forced back to Kabul by the Maratha army, which was led by Sadashivrao and his nephew, Vishwasrao. But, I remember, that Mughals had won the battle. Why is it written that Marathas had won?
The book didn't go into the details of the battle. Rather, it explains in detail the impacts of the war on the power struggle in India. As Gaitonde reads,
the victory of the Marathas was not only a morale booster,
confidence booster.
The victory of the Marathas was not only a morale booster, but also establish their supremacy in northern India. The East India Company, which had been watching the Marathas' growing supremacy, paused their expansionist program. For the internal politics of Marathas, there was an increase in the influence of Sadashiv Rao and Vishwas Rao. Vishwas Rao became the leader. Dada Saheb eventually retired from politics. The East India Company was powerless in front of the new ruler, Vishwas Rao. He, with his brother, Madhvarav, expanded their influence all over India. The company became limited to small areas around Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras. For political reasons, the Mughal rule was kept alive in Delhi. The king was only there to approve the orders from the Marathas. In the 19th century, the Maratha rulers recognized the importance of technology. Here East India Company saw an opportunity to extend its influence. It offered help and experts. In the 20th century, India moved towards democracy. The Marathas were gradually replaced by democratically elected bodies. The Mughal rule at Delhi survived this change, because it had no real influence.
As he read on, Gangadharpant began to appreciate the India he had seen.
It was a country that had not been subjected to slavery for the white man. It had learned to stand on its feet and know what self-respect was. For commercial reasons, it had allowed the British to retain Bombay as the only outpost. But my investigations are incomplete. How did the Marathas win the battle? To find the answer, I must look for details of the battle itself.
He searched through the books. At last, he found one that gave him the clue.
Yeah, this one.
Basahi Banshi Bakar. Although he hardly relied on Bakars for historical evidence, he found them entertaining to read. Buried in the detailed narratives, he could spot the germ of truth. He found the germ of truth.
And then, Vishwasrao guided his horse to the melee, where the elite troops were fighting, and he attacked them. And God was merciful. A shot brushed past his ear. Even the difference of a till would have led to his death. Oh! The bullet did not hit Vishwasrao, so the Marathas won the battle.
Sir, the library is closing.
He noticed that he was the only reader left in the hall.
I beg your pardon, sir. May I request you to keep these books here, for my use tomorrow morning? By the way, when do you open?
At 8 o'clock, sir.
As he left the table, he shoved some notes into his pocket. Absent-mindedly, he also shoved the Bakar into his other pocket, mistakenly. After finding a guest house to stay in, and having a meal, he set out to stroll towards Azad Maidan. There, he found a group of people moving towards a pandal. So, a lecture was to take place. Out of habit, he went towards the pandal. The lecture was in progress. People kept coming and going. But Professor was staring at the stage, as if mesmerized. There was a table and a chair, but the chair was unoccupied.
Presidential chair unoccupied?
The sight moved him. He swiftly moved towards the chair.
Vacate the chair! Away from the platform, mister!
The chair is symbolic, don't you know?
Ladies and gentlemen, an unchaired lecture is like Shakespeare's Hamlet without the Prince of Denmark. Let me tell you.
Keep the platform empty, please!
We only want to listen to the speaker.
But he had the experience of speaking at 999 meetings. He kept on talking. He soon became a target for a shower of tomatoes, eggs and other objects. Finally, the audience swarmed to the stage, to eject him out bodily. And, in the crowd, he was nowhere to be seen.
That is all I have to tell, Rajendra. All I know is that, I was found in the Azad Maidan in the morning. But, I was back in the world I am familiar with. Now, where exactly did I spend those 2 days, when I was absent from here?
What? Gaitonde was absent for 2 days?
Professor, just before your collision with the truck, what were you doing?
Collision with a truck? But wasn't he going through train?
I was thinking of the catastrophe theory, and its implications for history.
Oh. That means, Gaitonde was actually going in a car. When he was imagining about the catastrophe theory, he collided with a truck. So his brain started imagining all this story. But was he really, just imagining?
Right. I thought so.
Don't smile smugly. In case you think that it was just my imagination, look at this.
Professor took out from his pocket a torn page from the Bakar.
I had mistakenly slipped the Bakar in my pocket as I left the library. It seems that in the event of Azad Maidan, the book was lost. Only this torn page remained. And luckily, this is the page that contained the evidence.
Then he opened his original copy of Bakar. The torn page showed that Marathas had won. But the original book shows that they had lost. The professor was certainly not dreaming, as he had the torn page. Then where had he been?
Now, would you say I brought this page from my imagination?
Professor Gaitonde, you have given me food for thought. Until I saw this evidence, I had simply considered your experience as your imagination. But facts can be stranger than fantasies, as I am beginning to realize.
Facts? What are the facts? I am dying to know.
Rajendra started pacing the room, under great mental stress.
Professor Gaitonde, I will try to explain your experience, on the basis of 2 scientific theories. Only you can judge whether I succeed or not in convincing you of the facts. Because you have passed through a fantastic experience, or, more correctly, a catastrophic experience.
Catastrophe theory explains how a very small event can cause a large outcome. For example, in the Bakar Gaitonde had read, it was written that the bullet missed Vishwasrao. This small event led to their victory.
Please continue, Rajendra. I am all ears.
You have heard a lot about the catastrophe theory at that seminar. Let us apply it to the Battle of Panipat. Wars fought face to face on open grounds offer excellent examples of this theory. The Maratha army was facing Abdali's troops on the field of Panipat. The forces of both the troops was similar. Their armor was comparable. So, a lot depended on the leadership and the morale of the troops. According to actual history, the bullet hit Vishwasrao. That proved to be the turning point. Because of this, the Maratha army lost their morale and fighting spirit. Consequently, they lost the battle. And what you have shown me on the torn page, is the detail, of when the bullet missed Vishwasrao. The impact of this crucial event was exact opposite on the army. It boosted their morale, helping them win the battle.
Maybe. Similar statements are made about the Battle of Waterloo, which Napoleon could have won. But we live in a unique world which has a unique history. This idea of, it might have been, is okay for the sake of speculation but not for reality.
I disagree with you here. In fact, that brings me to my second point, which you might find strange, but please hear me out. What do we mean by reality? We experience it directly with our senses, or indirectly via instruments. But, is it limited to what we see? Does it have other forms? There have been experiments on very small systems, of atoms and their constituent particles. When dealing with such systems, the physicist found something surprising. What? They found that the behavior of these systems cannot be predicted definitively, even if all the laws of physics are known. Take an example. I fire a bullet from a gun in a given direction, at a given speed, I know where it will be at a later time. But if I fire an electron from a source, I cannot tell where it will be. It may be here, there, anywhere. At best, I can only tell where it is more probable to be at a specific time, but not the exact location.
The lack of determinism in quantum theory. Even a stupid historian like me has heard of it.
So, imagine many worlds. In one world, the electron is found here, in another it is over there. In another, it is in a still different location. Once the observer finds where it is, we know which world we are talking about. But all those worlds exist at the same time.
But is there any contact between those many worlds?
Yes and no. Yes, because the structure of the atoms is the same, the electron is orbiting around the nucleus. And no, because each world exists independently, and there is no direct interaction or contact between the different worlds.
Like planets orbit around the sun.
Not quite. We know the precise trajectory of the planet. But we don't, in the case of an atom. The electron could be orbiting in any of its states. In state 1, the electron is in a state of lower energy. In state 2, it is in a state of higher energy. It can make a transition from high to low energy, by sending a pulse of radiation. Or, a pulse of radiation can knock it out of state 1, to state 2. Such transitions are common in microscopic systems. What if it happened on a macroscopic level?
I get you. You are suggesting that I made a transition from one world to another and back again?
Unbelievable though it seems, this is the only explanation I can offer. My theory is that, catastrophic situations offer different ways for the world to proceed. By making a transition, you were able to experience two worlds, one at a time. The one you live in now, and the one where you spent the 2 days. One has the history we know, the other, a different history. And the separation took place in the Battle of Panipat. At the point when the bullet was fired. In the world we live in, the bullet hit Vishwasro, and the world proceeded accordingly. In the world you made the transition to, the bullet missed him, and the world proceeded accordingly. You neither traveled to the past, nor the future. You were in the present, but experiencing a different world. By the same logic, there must be many more different worlds, arising at different points of time.
But why did I make the transition?
If I knew the answer, I would solve a great problem. Unfortunately, there are many unsolved questions in science, and this is one of them. But that does not stop me from guessing. You need some interaction to cause a transition. Perhaps, at the time of your collision with the truck, you were thinking about the catastrophe theory and its role in wars. Maybe you were thinking about the Battle of Panipat. Perhaps, the neurons in your brain acted as a trigger.
A good guess. I was indeed wondering what course history would have taken, if the Marathas had won. That was going to be the topic of my 1000th presidential address.
Now, you can narrate your real-life experience in the lecture, rather than just theorizing.
No. Rajendra, my 1000th address was made on the Azad Maidan, when I was so rudely interrupted. The Professor Gaitonde who disappeared while defending his chair on the platform, will now never preside at another meeting. I have conveyed my regrets to the organizers of the Panipat seminar.
Let me explain you the whole story. Gaitonde was going from Pune to Bombay, for his 1000th speech. At a point of time, he was thinking, what would the world look like, if Marathas had won the battle? Just then, his car collided with a truck. This collision triggered his brain, and he transitioned to a different world. He transitioned to a world where he was going to Bombay, but in a train. In that world, the Marathas had won the battle. That's why it was different from our world. The railway staff consisted of Anglo-Indians and Parsis. The East India Company was still working. The roads looked like as in England. His son didn't exist. And the history books showed that the Marathas had won. Even the books written by him existed there, but with a different history. When he was beaten in the Azad Maidan, he transitioned back to our world, and explained this story to Rajendra, his friend, who, as a physicist, explained what happened. Mind-blowing. Isn't it? I hope you understood the story.